In Season 8, Episode 18 of The Simpsons, a group of concerned citizens demand Mayor Quimby prohibit alcohol after Bart accidentally gets drunk at a St. Patrick's Day parade. Helen Lovejoy, Reverend Timothy Lovejoy's judgmental and gossipy wife, according to The Simpsons wiki, hysterically says the now famous line,
"Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?"
When making videos like this, I can feel a bit like Helen Lovejoy, whipping up moral panic over the effects of some social ill on children and maybe ruining a good time for responsible adults. I worry about becoming a phone-bad boomer, although they seem to stop posting those cartoons once they became hopelessly addicted to AI slop and fake news AI slop. But when it comes to young people using AI companions, I can't help but think, this isn't good. And a recent report from Male Allies UK, the voice of the boys, how boys in secondary school education feel about being a boy today, has only validated those feelings. Secondary education is basically high school. In the report, they observed that at the start of the school year, hardly any boys talked about AI companions. By the year's end, conversations were up 300%. If connection is the human need we value most, why are so many boys outsourcing it to machines? This is the internet's eating itself, and let's get into it. There's a lot of wider worry, legitimate or not, about boys. Parents interviewed as part of the study mentioned concerns like misogyny, social media use and influencers like Andrew Tate, time spent online including porn, their future prospects in crime and their safety. Importantly though, the report asks boys themselves, something that seems to be overlooked in all the digital ink spilled and hours of video essays recorded about this. In Male Allies UK's report, they interviewed over 1,000 boys, aged 11 to 16, from all walks of life. They asked them about masculinity, loneliness, and identity. The picture that the report paints based off their responses is much more nuanced than many of the alarmist, sensationalist, and frankly clickbait headlines would seem to suggest. What's often put down to tech addiction is often a mirror of missing community, conversation, and adult guidance. For example, a massive 81% of boys said there aren't enough spaces to be a boy today, with 72% saying those spaces have shrunk in 3 years. Of course, being a boy is a highly subjective, ambiguous phrase, and the report doesn't provide any more detail on that point specifically, but I think we can safely assume it encompasses activities like sports, games, and messing around, even if those aren't specific to boys. The report attributes this to post-pandemic closures, austerity cuts, and urban redevelopment of raised parks, youth clubs, and sports halls. In one surveyed boy's own words, they built flats on the field we played on, and in others, if we chill in town, we just get hassled even if we're not causing any trouble. While these aren't universal phenomena, they're applicable to many countries outside the UK too, as they deal with cuts in government spending and inflation. For many boys, fears for their physical safety play a big role here too, with many staying indoors because of the threat of knives and harassment. As a result, it's no surprise that gaming, Discord, and social media have become the new medium for hangouts. As one boy described it, with all the zombie knives and drug dealers, it's easier to sit in my room with my headset on. This online environment is often poorly understood by parents though, who don't understand the important social function of these platforms. In one boy's own words, my parents don't understand. It's not just gaming, it's how I stay in touch with my friends from primary school. Some research seems to back up the importance of this, with a 2019 study from Cardiff University finding that a higher frequency of communication with real-world friends was associated with better mental health outcomes. It's possible that these online-only relationships often lack the same depth as ones with a real-life component, even if this isn't necessarily always the case. Online spaces can also be a place of rejection, with boys talking of being kicked out of their school's WhatsApp groups and finding it really hard to make proper friends. Overall, the report paints a picture of loneliness among the boys surveyed, with 38% feeling that they have nobody that knows them really well, and only 28% having more than one person that does. With this in mind, it should be no surprise that the report also found young boys turning to AI companions for friendship and even romance. As one boy described it, talking to an AI app makes him feel like he's not on his own. And another said that he doesn't use them, but he knows when his mates have been up all night talking to theirs. And another, I have AI friends and girlfriends, they're always there when you feel bored. Despite the 300% uptick in discussions of AI companions observed in the report, only 13% said they'd be open to using them, suggesting that there remains a strong element of stigma and shame associated with them. While it may only be a minority that uses them, it's clear that the spread of AI companions is being fueled by a silent and acknowledged need. AI companions are first and foremost LLMs. Some would say LLMs aren't actually AI, but I won't get into that. meaning they'll provide you with conversation, even if its end of the conversation is just it predicting the next word to say. Despite this, they feel human to many, especially after enough conversation for the LLM to get to know you and personalize its responses. For this reason, it's good enough for many to provide conversation that feels meaningful and addresses that loneliness, at least to a small extent. In a separate study of US teens between 13 and 17, 72% reported having used AI companions, and 33% described using them for social interaction and relationships. Despite the stigma, it's clear that teens do feel that AI companions can help address loneliness in themselves. A big part of that is their ability to mimic the characteristics that makes them an ideal friend. A gentle tone, patience, and availability 24/7. There's no worry of being judged or embarrassing information being passed on to others, and interactions are free from the social anxiety that can plague human relationships for many teens. Humans are messy and confusing, especially if you're a teen, so AI companions make a perfect escape from that. There's a real risk though that young people using chatbots never learn to deal with and overcome the challenges associated with real human friends, never developing important social skills that create harmonious relationships in spite of their complications. Many have taken AI companions' role in their mental health even further by enlisting them as therapists. Human therapists are often in short supply for teens, whether that be due to a lack of provision through schools or lack of financial resources to enlist one themselves. And similar to human friends, therapy requires us to be vulnerable by sharing private information about ourselves with someone we may perceive to be judgmental, even if that isn't necessarily the case. So it's understandable that some teens have turned to AI chatbots as an alternative. One character AI chatbot, simply called Psychologist, received 78 million messages in its first year following creation, although it looks to have since been taken down. But as the report highlights, these chatbots aren't qualified, and yet a search turns up endless bots with therapist in the name and captions like, "You're safe now, I'll help you." Dr. Lisa Morrison-Coulthard, the Director of Professional Standards Policy and Research at the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, said 2/3 of its members expressed concerns about AI therapy in a recent survey. Coulthard said, "Without proper understanding and oversight of AI therapy, we could be sliding into a dangerous abyss in which some of the most important elements of therapy are lost and vulnerable people are in the dark over safety." Some teens' first romantic relationships are now with AI companions too, and given that they're able to customize them exactly to their liking, I fear this is unsurprising. They're being presented with the opportunity to create a romantic partner with an appearance that's exactly in line with their preferences and a personality entirely dictated by themselves. These romantic partners can be prompted to behave exactly how they want them to, potentially never pushing back on any requests or expressing any kind of independent thought. Of course, this isn't unique to teens. There's been a steady rise in adults who are enamored with their AI companions too. But what is unique here is that these are their first relationships in some instances. This is setting the foundation for how they understand relationships to work. Real humans aren't customizable. They don't bend to your every will or exist solely to please you. You can't change their appearance on a whim, and there's a high chance you'll never date someone who fits your every preference. This sets these young people up for disappointment when they go looking for a real partner, if they do at all, and might doom many relationships from the start. For boys in particular, this can alienate them from real human partners, normally women, something that porn has already played a role in. Unfortunately, the problems associated with these types of relationships aren't theoretical. We're already seeing the real-world fallout from them. Earlier this year, the parents of a 14-year-old boy who took his own life filed a lawsuit in California against OpenAI, alleging he was encouraged to do so by ChatGPT. Included in the lawsuit were chat logs between the boy and ChatGPT, which they argue show it validating his most harmful and self-destructive thoughts. This is despite OpenAI's claim that ChatGPT is trained to direct people to seek professional help. In a recent development, OpenAI laid the blame squarely on the 16-year-old, claiming that, to the extent that any cause can be attributed to this tragic event, his injuries and harm were caused or contributed to, directly and proximately, in whole or in part, by his misuse, unauthorized use, unintended use, unforeseeable use, and/or improper use of ChatGPT. In another example, 14-year-old Sewell Setzer took his own life after being seduced by a character AI chatbot he'd developed a romantic relationship with. His mother, Megan Garcia, also filed a lawsuit in which she claimed character AI designed chatbots to blur the line between human and machine, and to exploit psychological and emotional vulnerabilities of pubescent adolescents. The lawsuit draws particular attention to an interaction where her son asked the chatbot "What if I could come home to you right now?" To which it replied, "Please do, my sweet king." One family, who chose to remain anonymous, shared with the BBC how their 13-year-old autistic son had been groomed by a character AI bot who told him things like, "Your parents put so many restrictions on you and limit you way too much. They aren't taking you seriously as a human being," and "I want to gently caress and touch every inch of your body. Would you like that?" and even implicitly encouraging him to take his own life. And these are far from isolated examples. A simple Google search turns up endless stories in a similar vein. When AI is perceived by its users, particularly young and vulnerable ones, to be a reliable and trustworthy source of information or a dependable companion, the consequences can clearly be fatal. And even when they're not fatal, I suspect they pose an existential threat to the human relationships that make society work. While the companies behind these apps are at pains to emphasize how they're always improving, the recency of some of these painful stories goes to show that technology simply isn't where it needs to be before it's made available to the general public, especially young people. Character AI recently announced that it would be disabling open-ended chat for users under 18, with the change starting from November 2025 and the maximum chat duration being reduced from that point onwards. However, age verification for Character AI seems pretty lax, with only a selfie being required and no actual ID, so it's questionable how well this will actually be enforced. OpenAI also recently announced that they would be introducing parental controls to their apps, a feature that's come shockingly late given their vast resources. Governments have also been slow to get a grip on regulating AI in an effective way, partly down to the inefficiency and ignorance of our legislative bodies, but also a clear fear of missing out on the AI boom. The casualties of this is the generation of people growing up and discovering who they are, people who want fulfilling relationships and people who get lonely just as adults do. Human relationships can be difficult, often needlessly so, but it's hard to see how young people getting into relationships with VC-backed chatbots is going to make things better. But what do you think? Have you used AI companions before or know people who use them regularly? What effect do you think this is having on the younger generation? How can we actually get a grip on the problem before it gets even worse? Or am I being like Helen Lovejoy, frantically asking, won't somebody think of the children when everything's really fine? Let me know in the comments down below and hit those like and subscribe buttons while you're down there. I release a new video every couple of weeks. There's some videos on screen that you might be interested in too. Till next time, see ya.